Watch the stump. I'm off.
About 10 years ago, I established some of my hardest first ascents. One of them has still not been repeated. I'm currently working on a project which is likely to be one of my most difficult first ascents, so I thought it would be interesting to come back and see how hard and dangerous these older routes really are. I'm going to revisit 2 routes today. I'm going to see if I can still actually climb them. I'll check out the gear placements, and then I will also test the danger with a bit of a bag drop. So the first route that we're at is called the Bigger Barron. I did this back in 2015, I think. Originally I started it from the left on an easy start, traversed in, and then climbed up the prow. And that was about E9-ish. And the interesting thing about this was that it had some old caving bolts. So originally it was an aid line, and I think cavers had drilled their way up and practiced drilling for caving, essentially. And 3 bolts still remain on the route, but they're marooned in the middle of the wall. So you have this kind of like spicy bit to get to them. Then you clip these bolts, which only go in. Then you have to hope that they don't fall out if you fall off, and then you climb above them. Kind of really safe, but you're not sure how safe it is. So I started on the easy start. Then I thought that wasn't very legit, because the pure line is coming right from the bottom of this ship's prow on this really difficult squeezing climbing. It's maybe like 8B plus, I thought it was. So the grade of the one from the bottom gets E10. The grade from the cop out from the side, that gets E9. So I've done some directionals off the bolts. It is a bit interesting, this route, because obviously it's got these old bolts in, and that is very, very unusual for gritstone. I'm not sure when they were put in. I think it was sometime in the 50s maybe. Yeah, these days definitely no bolts are placed on the grit, and if they were, then I'm not quite sure what would happen to you. When I initially came to this route in 2013 or 14, it had this aura around it as one of the last great problems, and some of the really good Peak District climbers had tried it. And I remember there being whisperings of it having like a Font 8B boulder problem on it. But the rumour of it being a Font 8B plus boulder problem actually turned out to be, it was a French 8B route. At the time I was working as a tree surgeon. I went back to work, and the guy who was running the company was also a really good Peak District climber, had tried the route. I told him that I'd done it. He was like, oh, you did start from the bottom, you didn't come in from the left, did you? And I was like, no, I came in from the left. And then he looked really disappointed. He looked really disappointed that I'd come in from the left, and he was like, oh, well, you need to start from the bottom then, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I do need to start from the bottom. So then I came back the next year and I started up the real start, the proud start. I don't think anybody's been on it for a while, because the rock is quite dirty. There's a nugget here, which I snapped off. Where I'm brushing, you can see the rock there is a slightly different colour. And then that's the other pinch there. What is quite nice though, is getting on it and seeing that it's actually really hard. That's actually quite nice. Didn't get on it and go, these holds are massive. So when I actually did this, I remember spending quite a number of sessions on this bottom bit, just coming up and working this boulder problem at the bottom. Yeah. Because it's one thing actually just being able to do the boulder problem, but it's another thing being able to do it consistently, and then consistently with confidence that you're actually not going to fall. Yeah. So it's like getting it to a level where you're a grade or 2 grades kind of above where the boulder problem is, or you've climbed on it so much that it just kind of feels easy. I remember doing it and it didn't feel easy, but I remember being reasonably consistent on it. But I do remember training specifically for this. I mean, it's definitely as hard as I remember it being. I'm not sure where the holds are. Like, I remember this bottom bit being very hard when I did it, and now getting back on it, I can see the moves and I found the holds again, but it's still tricky, for sure. It is still tricky. Like, it would take me a few sessions, I think, to be able to get back into doing that and also doing it well.
Nice t-shirt, by the way.
Oh yeah, thank you. New Wide Boyz store, link in description. quite tricky actually. One thing that we can often do when we're trad climbing before we go for the kind of serious head point where there might be an element of danger or a bad fall potential, we can do something called a bag drop, and you kind of test where the highest place you can fall in the most dangerous position. You drop an object, a bag in this case, and you see where it lands, how it lands, what it hits, how it swings, and the potential of injury. Dropping a bag, we can't really see the potential injury. So what we have in this case at Wide Boyz, this science-y case, is we have an egg meant to represent my head. A helmet. So we put the head in the helmet, close it up, and then we'll put this in our bag, drop it from the top of the crux just before you clip the first piece of gear. See where it lands, how it lands. If the egg survives, we're good to go. If the egg doesn't survive, we'll move on to route number 2 swiftly. So I'm now carrying me on my back. 3, 2, 1. Well, it didn't hit the floor. I didn't really see what happened. Did you see what happened, Pete?
Yeah, it hit something pretty hard.
Well, where the bag has ended up is where your waist would be. So if we imagine our legs below that, it could be quite painful. But I mean, that wasn't too bad. I don't think that was actually too bad at all. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that myself, but it was, yeah, that was not too bad. Let's go and take a look.
That's the egg.
Oh! It's mullered. I wasn't expecting that actually. I thought it was going to be all right.
I thought it was going to be fine.
Okay, that's the brain. I'm glad I didn't test that 10 years ago. For me, I find it actually quite interesting how from age of 18 to 25, I was always really keen to do these routes and motivated by these routes with like a bit of spice factor, a bit of danger, like the ground's really close. You could definitely break some bones. And I actually feel now looking back on it, you actually feel quite relieved that I managed to finish that phase of my climbing, having never like got injured. So yeah, it's actually quite nice that I don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. So 10 years on, is it as hard? I do think it's as hard as I remember. The bottom bit is definitely tricky. 10 years later, I still think it's hard. That's the conclusion. I do think it's tricky. And the bolts now, I didn't really test the bolts, but 10 years later, they still held a bit of tension weight. So I was tension on them and they didn't pop out. On to the next. Okay, so here we are at Burbage South. We're at route number 2 of the day. This is quite an iconic route from when I did it back in 2008 with the big high heel hook over the hand, rocking over. It is dynamics of change. As it's been quite a long time since I've climbed this route, I'd be quite interested to see what they put in the guidebook. So I'm going to check the Rockfax app and we'll see what they've written. So when we're looking in the guidebook, I don't write the description. I do the route, but it's the guidebook writers that write the description. So when I've done a new route and then it comes out in a guidebook, I'm always really interested to see, first of all, how many stars they put on it, what they've written. The grade, obviously I give the grade, but then any other like factors that they put in, I think it's kind of interesting. So we're going to take a little look now.
What are you hoping for in terms of stars?
I would say for this route, 1 or 2. If it was 2, I'd be happy. 1, that's okay. 3, I don't think 3-star is like your absolute, it's got to be worldwide renowned mega route classic. So it's not 1 or 2, 1 or 2.
What if it's 0?
I'd be unhappy. What have we got? We've got bizarre climbing up the leaning face below Braille Trail, includes a dyno and the world's hardest mantle. It's got 2 stars. It's a 2-star route. If you haven't come across the Rockfax app, it's a bit of a beast of a guidebook. It's got 1,300 crags, got 65,000 routes across the whole of the UK and destinations in Europe. You can just download what you need, you can use it offline. Basically, it just keeps everything really simple. Everything is all in one place, and simple is good. So within the app, there's also loads of different styles of climbing from all the different ranges of guidebooks. We've got like sport climbing, trad climbing like we're doing today, bouldering, alpine climbing in Chamonix. It even has deep water solo climbing like we did with Toby the other week. So whatever style you're into, either in the UK or across European destinations, there is going to be something for you in there. Because the app is digital, then it is always up to date. So when I go into it, I've actually gone onto one of my old routes here, which is called Grandad's Slab, and it said there's a crucial pebble missing. It's really nice that you can go on and these updates are in. As well as it always being up to date, another advantage of it being digital is it has these interactive maps, interactive lines. So basically I can zoom into the topo, I can click on the line, and then it automatically just brings up the description of that route. It's just like, that looks good, bosh, click, description. So at the moment, Rockfax are giving 10% off your yearly subscription fee if you use code Wide Boyz at checkout. Just go to rockfax.digital/Wide Boyz and get 10% off. So this route is one of my first ever new routes. I did it 15 years ago, over 15 years ago now, back when I was 17, so a long time ago. And it's one of those moves which in some way I feel like has never got old. Even 17 years on, I still see clips of it come up on Instagram. It'd be quite funny if it is totally desperate and I can't do the move. That would be good. Just ab down it and felt the holds for the first time. It definitely feels a bit more slopey than I thought, than I remember. Like the right hand sloper is pretty open and just like, and this one is maybe like a bit more slopey as well than I remember. I remember it being a bit more square cut, and this edge is actually quite slopey as well. It's all quite slopey. I mean, good conditions are a definite for this one because it's kind of like proper gritstone. So when I actually did the route, you actually start up an E4, which is called Blinded by Science, on the right-hand side of this arête. But because that's not all that interesting, I'm just gonna start up here and we're gonna get to the interesting stuff. Yeah, that's the hold. Ooh, yeah, that's the dyno. Whoa! Just gotta go for it. Okay, so here we are at the crux, and I've just done the dyno move. So the dyno move comes from this hold here. It's actually quite a good hold, and then you jump all the way out to the foothold on Braille Trail, and that's the one you have to mantle on. So it's this one here. It's quite blind, the dyno, when you're jumping to it, so it's actually difficult to see, but if you just go for it, then you don't really miss it. Or that's what it felt like then. So the dyno just then definitely felt much easier than I remember it. I remember working that dyno for quite a while and still thinking I was going to fall off it, whereas now I just did it first go and it didn't feel that bad. So I can understand why people think that the dyno is not too bad and the rockover is actually the crux, whereas when I did it I thought it was the other way around. You flick your heel out to the jug on Parthian shot, and then you do a little match on this hold, and then you go over to this sloper here. So this sloper feels pretty good when you're below it, but then it just gets like worse and worse as you start to rock over on this hold. So I think this is going to be pretty interesting to see how good my rock over skills are and how good my flexibility is compared to my 17-year-old self. Let's warm into it. Where's the hold? Oh, I missed it. Proper move, you want to have that one dialed, for sure. You want to be doing that one a few times. This bit's not difficult, but it's like, you definitely need to know the sequence. No, I remember the sequence of the rock over. Yeah, I remember the sequence. Good.
15 years later.
I still have some flexibility in my legs, so that's good.
What you got there, Pete?
Okay, so the plan now is to try the bag drop test, and this is going to simulate what it's like to fall off the last hardest move. So that is the crux move of Braille Trail, which is the slab move into the good hold. And we have Pete's head number 2, which we're going to put in the helmet in the bag, which represents our body, and then we're going to drop the bag from the crux and see where it lands. This one felt more run out when I was up there compared to the route earlier today, but again, when I climbed this route, I never did a bag drop, never did a test, never did anything like that. I just went for it. I don't think the egg is going to last. Okay, so we are at the last droppable move, which is the move to that good slot. And I think if you dropped it right at the end of the move, which is where you would drop it if you were going to fall off, then your waist would be about here, where the bag is there. So we're going to drop the bag from here, and the gear is down there, so that's the left hand rope, and then the right hand rope sort of goes around the corner there. Let's see, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. So I'm thinking, I think the bag hit this rock, so I think you might hit that rock, but potentially with a good belayer they might be able to keep you off the floor. I saw another guy trying it and he sort of like controlled and fell off. He really hit that wall quite hard and hurt his ankles. I've got a clip of that somewhere. We can come up with all the theories that we want, but the telling thing is, how is Pete's head 2 So that one didn't break. That's incredible. Which makes sense because this one's E9 and the other one's E10. It's all making sense now. It's all making sense.
Well, you should check and see if it's got any hairline cracks, because that was one of the things.
It's fine. It's totally fine. Pete's Head 2. There's no faking it here. That's incredible. I'm going to eat that tonight. It's going to be dinner. Perfect. My grading from 10 years ago was bang on. And we can safely say that E10 is more dangerous than E9, even though that's not how the E-grading system works. Comment on that one. There we go. The head is fine, the legs are broken. Okay, so if you have got this far in the video, folks, you are definitely keen for some spicy trad climbing, and that is why you are not going to want to miss this video here, where Anna tries Once Upon a Time in the Southwest, same grade as this one, E9, and her gear falls out mid-crux.